This is from Nick, and I put you in there, Nick, because it kind of finishes the thought we have on prophets and prophecy and what's going on right now in the world. And he says this: what's next on the prophetic timeline, question mark? Does anything else need to happen before the rapture? And then his second part says this: by the way, I'm totally expecting the rapture to happen at any moment. Also, why is it important that Trump is involved with these peace deals? Not sure what he's referencing there, except for the ones that just happened, so that's probably it. Lastly, I thought that the Antichrist was going to be doing that.
Right. When you're talking about the rapture, there is nothing that has to happen before Jesus comes back.
Nothing.
And so Jesus made that really clear in the last things that he said to the disciples. When you're looking at what's called the Olivet Discourse, Matthew chapter 24 through chapter 25 and Luke chapter 21, when you look at the Olivet Discourse, those are some of the last things he said to the disciples. And I whenever I think of that, I think of when I was in junior high and I was babysitting my brothers and sisters. The last thing that my mom and dad would say to me when they went out the door was the most important thing. And I believe that that's the case in this situation. Jesus in Matthew chapter 25 has said, "Who then is a faithful and wise servant whom his master made ruler over his household to give them food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Assuredly, I say to you that he'll make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he's not looking for him and at an hour that he's not aware of, and will cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And Jesus is in the previous illustration, the illustration of the days of Noah, this illustration right here, and then in the next illustration, the parable of the 10 virgins. In all those illustrations, what he was, the main thought behind this is, I can come at any moment. You need to be ready for me. And so there's nothing on the prophetic scenario that needs to happen before Jesus came back. Frankly, there was nothing on the prophetic scenario that needed to happen 40 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 100 years ago. And we could go back down through history. God could have easily done the whole book of Revelation, had Jesus come back, take the church out, done the book of Revelation in ways that we can't even understand. He could have performed all those things, and we didn't need to be in the day that we're living in.
Yeah.
God can do anything he wants, right? And so,
which was their interpretation, by the way.
Yeah.
Apostles.
And so when we're looking at the times that we're living in, what's cool about the times that we're living in is we're seeing things in the book of Revelation that we've never seen in the world. And we're in times where those things could be fulfilled right now.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like, whenever I look at this, Chuck Missler used to talk about when you see the Christmas decorations going up, that Thanksgiving is near. And that used to be the case. Now it's when you see the Christmas decorations going up, that Halloween is near, or sometimes Labor Day, depending on where you're at. And the point being that you have an event that's going to come to pass before Christmas ever comes. And it's the same thing with the stuff that we see with the book of Revelation. So no, there's nothing that you need to be looking for Jesus to come back. As far as some of the events that are taking place, things that I'm looking at, I'm watching Turkey and Russia and Iran right now, because they're mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. Also Libya and Ethiopia, the area around south and east of Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan, those countries. I'm watching those nations and their involvement with Russia. I'm watching China because it talks about the kings of the East. I'm watching India because they would be included in the kings of the East. And so I'm watching those nations because they're mentioned in the book of Revelation in vague terms, kings of the East specifically. In vague terms, the other nations are mentioned specifically. So I'm watching the events that are taking place there. The reason that Trump's situation with Middle East peace is so interesting is because in Ezekiel chapter 38, it says that when the Jews are attacked by the coalition of nations that I mentioned, Russia, Iran, Turkey, Ethiopia, Libya, all those nations, when they're attacked, it says that they're dwelling securely. And you specifically see in that passage that there is a complaint, and this is something that I'm watching right now too. There is a complaint from Saudi Arabia, and that's the term in the passage is Sheba and Dedan. And so that lets you know that Saudi Arabia has some kind of relation with the people of Israel at that time. And so this stuff that's going on with Bahrain and UAE and Israel is really interesting because that whole area is connected politically, specifically with Saudi Arabia. And so, just watch for what happens with Saudi Arabia. I would not be surprised if there's some kind of, diplomatic relations that take place between Saudi Arabia and Israel in the not too distant future that kind of cements their position in that area and makes them dwell securely. And it's at that point, the Bible says, they have to be, there's a situation that's somewhat similar there. I'm not saying that that's going to be it. I want to make that clear. But those are things that are going on in Ezekiel chapter 38 when they are attacked unexpectedly from this group of nations. And so that's stuff that I'm looking for. Did I hit everything?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that on the end of this. Well, I was going to make a comment too. It's interesting too. We talked a couple of weeks ago about how Saudi Arabia has now opened up their airspace and things they've never allowed Israel to do, which kind of sets them into a political position where they can do the things that the Bible talks about as far as what you're saying. So that's very interesting. But the difference between Trump and the peace deals that he's organizing and the Antichrist, the Antichrist peace deal is in a whole different situation than the ones Trump's doing right now, and that's how you would distinguish it.
Right. So it's in a different context. The context with the Antichrist has to do with the rebuilding of the temple.
Yes.
And so that's what you're looking for with that, and that makes a lot of sense. It looks like that peace deal takes place after this attack that takes place on Israel. So.